Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, we're doing margaritas. Cheers.
Cheers.
We are here for our Facebook Live event for moving to Mexico. We are going to wait a few minutes so people can pop on. So have a drink of your margarita.
Sure. It's good.
It's very good. Thank you. Gabrielle's the bartender. Yeah. So I think we just have to wait a few minutes and then we'll do the introductions.
Yeah, a couple of minutes.
It is, oh, we have somebody on. It's 6:15. Oh, hi, Lori.
Hi, Lori.
She's in Canada, I think. Yeah, it's just 6 o'clock here, so we'll wait a few minutes so people can join the broadcast. No, Mexican. Yeah, we're not on Mexican time. We need people to get here now. And we're planning on going for about an hour. So if we can't get through everything, we'll schedule another one of these. But let's wait a few minutes or a minute or so.
Paula.
Oh, hi, Paula.
Hi, Paula.
Yay. Well, they're in the cold. Yikes. It's very warm here. I'm sorry. We're just going to wait a few more minutes until a few more people join us, and then we'll get started. If you have questions, go ahead and write them in the comments, and we can track them and answer them as we go along.
Yep. Well, in fact, I'm going to go to check them out. Okay.
Well, are you going to?
See you later.
Okay. Are you coming back for the introduction or no? Okay. I hope that you guys have your margaritas because we have ours. Gabrielle mixed them up, and that's why he's the employee of the month. Cheers. Okay. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Joanne.
Gabrielle says hi. Thank you guys so much for joining. I was so nervous today. Poor Gabrielle has put up with me kind of whining all day. But I decided that we do this every Monday for Moving to Mexico Monday, and so I'm just going to pretend like you're all right in front of me, or you're here in the office, and we're just chatting. So it'll be casual, and it's nice to see some friends on here. Hi, Karen. And we'll wait for a few more. So everyone take a drink. Cheers. It's after work, but you guys might all be retired, so maybe you're not worried about work. Hi, Joe. Hi, Sonia. Shannon. Thank you guys so much for joining us. This is fun. And I don't have to put on my glasses yet. I can see it, so that's good. All right, we're going to wait a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. I know some people were nervous and weren't sure that they would get the notification. And honestly, we were nervous because we don't know how this works. So let's hold on and wait for a couple people that I know said we're going to be joining us. Hi, Shannon. Oh, thank you. I think we have a big delay on the comments. I'm just getting them now, so forgive me if I don't answer right away. I've got my notes here. I've got my notes. I have my monitor, and I have my margarita because this is nerve-wracking. Oh, let's see. Oh, Gabrielle joined. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for joining.
No, you're welcome.
All right, one more minute, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. And of course, put your questions in the comments, or not in the comments, in the video if you would like to, and I can address them before the end of this thing. I'm nervous. I should have had maybe one more margarita before we started, but I'll have another sip now. By the way, my husband makes a mean margarita, if you're wondering where to get good margaritas. So if we have to get out of the real estate business, he can mix some up for you. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kim Temple with Runaway Realty in Puerto Morelos, Mexico. And tonight we are doing our Moving to Mexico event, which is kind of patterned after something we've been doing for 3 years now, called Moving to Mexico Monday, and it's a live event that we do here in Puerto Morelos every Monday during high season at one of the local restaurants. And we found it's been super well received and really useful for people because a lot of people have maybe dreamed of moving to Mexico or are more seriously considering it, but really just don't know where to begin. And there's so much information out there floating around. And they also don't know anyone who's done it. And so they kind of don't know who to talk to. So that was kind of the impetus behind moving to Mexico Monday, was to give people solid information that they could use, to rely on to make some decisions, and also to introduce them to people who had already done it, which I think is probably one of the most helpful things about the program. But we kept getting requests to do it as a Facebook Live, which is not a terrible idea, but we do our event on the rooftop of La Serena, which is generally very windy, and every week it's different. So it wasn't going to be a super great way to present the information, because sometimes the group wants to talk about renting, other times they want to talk about buying, sometimes they don't care about any of that, they want to talk about medical care. So we kind of go with the flow on the live event. But for tonight, I've prepared a spiel that well, that's also the spiel that we do on Moving to Mexico Monday if people want to talk about buying. So I've got that here, and I thought we would cover that tonight. But if there's anything in particular that you want me to cover, please put it in the comments, and I will make sure to do that. And I see a lot of people on here are clients who have already bought properties. So this is going to be a little bit of overview for you because you've already done it. But really the biggest, oh wait, I should back up. I should introduce myself. Kim Temple, again with Runaway Realty. I have lived in Puerto Morelos full-time for 8 years. We've had a house here since 2001. And it's just my favorite place on the planet. People often say, how did you end up in Puerto Morelos? And I really don't have a good answer for that, except that I fell in love with it on a day trip in 1999 and found my way here. So I didn't look in other places in Mexico. It was not my plan to live here. And I mean, I didn't shop around for other towns. I just fell in love with Puerto Morelos. I love the town, I love the community. For me, this is the best place. But it turns out it was a great choice because we're so close to the airport, and it's turned out to be a very nice protected environment, which I really appreciate. So I'm glad I'm here, but I don't have a good scientific reason why I chose Puerto Morelos. So full-time since 2012. I started doing real estate in Puerto Morelos in 2012, and about 3 years ago, Gabrielle and I, who's over there, I don't know if he's coming on camera, we started Runaway Realty and got married. Woohoo! And we have 2 little dogs, and we love living here. Okay, I'll move along. I have an outline. Probably the biggest question that we get to this day is, can foreigners own property in Mexico? And the answer to that is yes, you absolutely can own property in Mexico. But the reason why there are doubts about this is very valid, because the Mexican Constitution actually does prohibit foreign ownership in a restricted zone along Mexico's borders. So it's 50 kilometers from a sea border and 100 kilometers from a land border where foreign ownership is restricted. And that is because Mexico was invaded a couple times and they wanted to protect their borders, which made perfect sense. But about 50 years ago, 50 or 60, the government said, hey, we want to encourage foreign investment, but we don't want to change our constitution. So they created a vehicle basically for foreign ownership, which is an asset trust called a fideicomiso. It's kind of a weird word, fideicomiso, but basically it's the same as a real estate asset trust that you would find in the US and Canada, and probably other countries around the world. So the fideicomiso is administered by a Mexican bank. There are about 7 banks that have been granted authority to administer these types of trusts. Unlike a mortgage bank, this fideicomiso bank doesn't have any interest in your property. They can't loan against it, they can't borrow against it, it's not an asset of the bank. Their sole function is administrative, and honestly what all they really do is send you a bill every year. So it's basically a legal fiction created to get around the prohibition against foreign ownership on the border. And the practical part that affects you as an owner is that you have to pay to set up the fideicomiso when you buy property. You're either going to set up a new one or you're going to transfer one from another foreigner, or, well, yeah, that's what you're going to do. And there's an annual fee for the fideicomiso, which right now is running around $500 US for the trust. And that fee is the same regardless of the price of property that you buy. So if you buy $1 million property, you're paying $500 a year. If you buy a $50,000 property, you're going to pay $500 a year. The bank doesn't have the right to enter your property. They can't tell you what you can do with your property. So you can destroy, add on, run a business. You can do anything you want. They do reserve some legal rights to defend the property if someone challenges title somehow. But that's rarely exercised, and typically in the asset trust, when we close, they give you the legal authority to represent everything about the property. The trust lasts 50 years and is automatically renewable at the end of that time period, of course, for a fee. And the only way that they can not renew the trust is if you've been convicted of federal crime involving the property. So similar to the US and Canada, if you are dealing drugs and you purchased the house with drug money, they can take it. Or if you've been convicted in Mexico, they can withdraw the trust. Let's see, last 50 years, we'll transfer or set up a new one, annual fee. Oh, so the trust is very cool in that you typically, if it's a husband and wife or domestic partners buying property, they are the primary beneficiaries of the trust. And then within the document, you designate secondary beneficiaries so that if both the primary beneficiaries pass away, it goes automatically as a matter of law to the secondary beneficiaries. This is a good thing because this keeps your property out of probate court in Mexico. You don't want to, well, you don't want to be involved in any court anywhere, but especially in Mexico, things can be very expensive and take a long time. So you don't want to be involved in that. And the Mexican government is under no obligation to honor a foreign will. So the trust is a nice way to protect your property for your heirs. So although some people don't like it and don't feel comfortable with it, the reality is it doesn't affect how you're going to own your property. It doesn't affect what you can do with your property, and it does provide some protection for your heirs, which is nice. The thing we don't like is that it costs a couple $1,000s at the front end to set up, about $500 a year, and then when you sell it, if you sell it to a Mexican, you can extinguish the trust because they don't need it, or your buyer is probably going to take your trust. I think that's it about fideicomisos. Does anyone have any questions about that before I move on? And I'll have a drink of my margarita now. No? Okay. So in terms of buying in Mexico, you don't need any particular visa status. If you're here legally as a tourist, you can buy property. You don't need a Mexican bank account, but you do need cash. All sales are cash here, and that is because no banks are offering mortgage loans against property in Mexico. The reason for that is that it's very difficult to repossess property under Mexican real estate law. It's, well, expensive and time consuming because the legal process doesn't work quickly. And so banks are not willing to extend a mortgage and have the risk that if the buyer defaults on the mortgage, they're not able to get the collateral back. For that reason, sellers are also unwilling to extend financing in most cases. I have seen some situations where a seller has agreed to extend financing, and I've seen exactly one of those situations go well. So it's probably much cleaner for you to go ahead and just buy the property outright if you can. Some developers will offer some limited short-term financing, especially if you buy in pre-construction. They may allow you to make payments until the property is delivered, but they will not let you, take possession of the property until it's paid for, typically. So that's the deal with that. So it is, kind of a steep market to get into in terms of having to come up with all the cash, but it is a very stable market because we don't have mortgages. And when the mortgage crisis happened in Florida, many people lost, half or all of the value in their property because the neighbor had to sell for pennies on the dollar. Here, you didn't have that situation. There was no mortgage crush, but nothing really moved for a while because American and Canadians couldn't borrow money to bring cash down here to buy. So you could still use your property, you could still rent your property, you still had a great asset that was still appreciating, but if you needed a quick sale, that was difficult. So I think that's kind of the overall thing to think about when you're investing in property here, is that you are like parking a large chunk of money that is not as easy to get out of as the stock market, for example. Sales here are much, much slower than a residential real estate market because it's all cash and second homes. So it's not unusual to have properties sit on the market for a year, 2 years, 3 years even, depending on the price point. So that's something to think about when you're making an investment decision. Let's see. So I guess because there are no mortgages, buyers are typically either financing against other assets at home, or they're bringing investment or retirement funds here and investing them. The buying process is very similar to what happens in the US and Canada. You find a property that you love, you submit a written offer, written acceptance, we negotiate, get everything in an agreement, and then you typically give an earnest money deposit, and we highly recommend that you use an escrow account for that. Most transactions, it's possible to use an escrow account, and so if at all possible, this is kind of my biggest suggestion today, is that you absolutely should use an escrow account. That way you don't have to give anyone any money until closing. I mean, you put the money in the escrow, but it doesn't go to anybody, and it's perfectly safe until closing. The closing process tends to take about 45 to 60 days, unless we're anywhere around Christmas or Easter, in which case it's probably going to be extended by 2 or 3 weeks because all the professional offices close down and some government offices close down. So that can really slow down our closings. The buyer typically pays the closing costs here. Not all the time. I've seen some people try to negotiate it out, but the more common issue is that the buyer pays the closing costs, and those can be quite steep. So at the $300,000 price point, closing costs are around 8% of the purchase price. At the $500,000 price point, they're closer to 6%. At the $100,000 price point, they're closer to 10 to 11%. Some of those are just flat fees, which is why it's pegged like that. The fideicomiso is a flat fee. There's some other flat fees, and then other parts of the closing costs are tied to the purchase price. So like purchase acquisition taxes and some of the other costs, the notario costs, the attorney legal fees. So, but the percentages I'm giving you include all of the buyer's closing costs. So the buyer wouldn't owe anything else. So that includes the cost to set up or transfer the trust. It includes the cost of an attorney. It includes the cost of the purchase acquisition taxes, all the registration fees, basically everything required to transfer the property to you. The seller will pay the real estate commission and will pay their own capital gains taxes. So they have their own costs as well. But everything that I've quoted now is wrapped up in the buyer's costs. Are there any questions about that? No? I feel like it's weird to just keep talking and talking.
It's okay.
No one, no one out there.
Oh, no, yeah. You have a couple questions here. You want to answer?
Okay. Oh, yeah. So Janine, how come I'm not seeing those questions? Let me look. Okay. Janine says, can you define cash? Is it a wire transfer or certified check? That's a really good question. So we typically use wire transfers. I would not bring a certified check to Mexico. There's too many issues with that. So the company that we use typically is Secure Title in Playa del Carmen, and they have an escrow account at Citibank in New York City. So sometimes the bulk of the money never comes to Mexico if it's a transaction between two foreigners. So that's how we typically do it. So you would wire transfer the money into the escrow account, and then at the closing, the escrow agent will distribute all the funds. What else? Let's see. Okay, I'll get to this a little bit later. All right.
Also, Janine is asking, like, can you go over the percentage again for the closing?
Sure. Janine's asking me to go over the percentages again for the closing costs. So and again, these are not precise. We would need to get a real quote on your closing costs because some things can make these different. But in general, at the $300,000 price range, your closing costs are going to be around 8% of the purchase price. At the $500,000 range, they're closer to 6%. At the $100,000 range, they're closer to 10 to 11%, which is a chunk. So it's important that you keep that in mind before you start looking at property, because that's really going to, help you figure out what you can afford and where you want to be with that. I hope that answers that for Janine. Rich Mallory is asking, do I consider counseling expats or Mexican nationals on Colorado law while in Mexico? No. I mean, I did practice law for 20 years in Colorado, but no. You cannot get a license to practice law here unless you have graduated from a Mexican law school. I'm not going back to law school. I did law school and graduated in '92, so I'm done. No, I wouldn't do that here. And I think that's it. Are we caught up? Janine, did I answer your questions? I hope. One thing I want to explain. So when you do a transfer of real property in Mexico, you have to use a person called a notario. A notario in Mexico is an attorney who's gone on to get a special designation, so that they are really more like quasi-governmental officials in that they are the only ones legally qualified to transfer real title. The other interesting thing about notarios is that they are legally responsible for doing the title search, which is why traditionally there were no title companies here, because the notario was the title company. They stood in the shoes of the title company. Now there are a couple title companies that will issue title insurance in Mexico if you want it. I've never had a client buy title insurance because in Puerto Morelos, which is where we typically work, title is very settled here. This is not a new city. This land was not ejido land, which is land that is similar to, in the US, we would call it tribal land. I think Canada has a similar designation. But basically it's owned by a tribe or a group and it can't be owned separately. It's very difficult to ever get separate title to land that was ever part of an ejido. It's not impossible, but anyway, that can be a cloud on title. So you kind of want to stay away from that property. But so the notario transfers the property. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. The notario, the most important thing to remember is that the notario does not represent you in the transaction. The notario has no legal obligation to you. So it's really, really important for buyers that you have your own legal representation when you buy a property. You need a Mexican attorney who can advise you on Mexican real estate law, can review all of the documents, and make sure that everything is correct and protective of your rights before you sign off on the transfer of title. There are some great attorneys in this area who also speak English that we are happy to recommend. It's not expensive. Attorneys here are much, much more reasonably priced than in other places. So it's well worth the investment in protecting your interest in your property and making sure that your transaction is done correctly. And for your peace of mind. So I know a lot of people come into me and say, well, I talked to Joe at the bar and Joe says, just go directly with the notario and you'll save money. Yes, you will save money, but no one's looking out for your interest. So if you don't speak Spanish or read Spanish, you have no idea what you're signing and whether it's correct or not. So please don't go into a real estate transaction without working with an attorney. And you should probably work with a professional agent too, but I won't do that plug right now. I should stop right here though. We do have a free ebook called 7 Things to Know Before Buying in Mexico. It's free. You can get it off of our page, and it really kind of goes through, what you need to know to avoid margarita fever, where you just buy a property without doing kind of your due diligence here. So please, I encourage you to download that if you would like and have some time. Okay. So the other question that we get a lot is, can the Mexican government just take my property? And the answer to that is no. The Mexican government cannot come and willy-nilly take your property. They can condemn your property and exercise eminent domain over it if they're going to do something like run a highway through. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Run a highway through your property or something like that. I mean, the Mayan train, they're probably condemning some private lands to run the Mayan train through. But they have to pay you, it goes through a legal process and they have to pay you a value. They can't just come seize your property. But I do want to address that because some of you may have seen reports recently. Honestly, I think it was 2 years ago in Tulum. There were all these reports that, oh my God, the Mexican government came in and took some hotels from people and got them out in the middle of the night. Well, unfortunately, that did happen. But what they didn't tell you is the backstory that some developers built on land that was ejido land, that they knew was ejido land. The tribe objected immediately, went ahead and built their business, kept it tied up in court for, I think, around 20 years is what I've heard. Lost at every step of the legal process, but kept appealing and therefore kept running their business and making a fortune. And finally, the government said, there's no more appeals. You have to get off the property. It's tribal land. They said no, and so they forcibly removed them. So terrible optic for Mexico, and sadly, the government gets the bad reputation. But when you know the backstory, it's a little more complex than what people present in the media. The other big story that kind of created this worry that Mexico could come in and take your property happened, I think it was the 70s, and it was actually an American developer in Baja California, built a beautiful development, sold a bunch of people on it. They weren't represented by counsel. Didn't have Mexican attorneys. It was also on ejido land, and same situation. They were in litigation for a long time, kept losing, and finally the government said, you have to get out. I'm sorry that you built your home on this, but buyer beware, you should have had legal counsel. You should have protected yourself. So they were swindled by an American. So that's great. But Mexico, took the brunt of that. So the feeling is that Mexico, the country of Mexico screwed people over when it was an American screwing people over. Okay, I feel like I've been talking straight for a little too long. I'm gonna have a drink of my margarita and catch up on the questions. And you guys can let me know if there are any more questions. Oh, hi, John. Okay, good. I'm seeing some good questions that I want to address. Okay. Thank you, honey. Okay. So I'm going back. Typical time range from offer and acceptance to closing. That's a really good question. Oh, I think I covered that. It usually takes like 45 to 60 days to close. Oops, I lost my camera. Honey, can you help me?
Sure.
It went down. I think that's okay. You can always ask for a delayed closing in your offer if you need it. That's not unusual if you want to get the property off the market, but need a few months to get your cash together to close. You can just offer that in the offer and see if the sellers will go for it. But if we just go straight through, it's typically 45 to 60 days, depending on the time of year. I hope that answers your question. Let's see, Janine is also asking about house inspections. Do they do house inspections? That is an interesting question. They do not. There are no companies that do home inspections here. There was one in Playa del Carmen that we used once, and he went out of business because no one's using them. The first thing is that all properties here are really sold as is. So you can do an inspection. I mean, I guess if you want to have a builder go in and look at it for you for your own knowledge, but the idea of having someone go in and kind of nitpick everything in the house and then giving that to the seller and asking them to fix it or come down on their price doesn't really exist. What you can do is have someone go in and look at it if you want. It's kind of hard with concrete construction. It's not like there's a roof problem that, you know, can destroy your house or, you know. So there's not a lot to look at when you're not going to hammer out the plumbing or something like that. And you can have an electrician test the outlets, but that doesn't give you a lot of information. So you can do that, but you're not going to negotiate with the seller on that. What you can do is if you feel like the house needs a lot of work or it's not finished, which happens a lot, houses are still under construction and we have buyers wanting to buy them, then I always say offer what you want to pay for the house right now, and then you have it finished the way that you want it instead of asking a seller to do something, because sellers will do the cheapest thing and may not do what you want them to do. So it's better to just, you know, offer what you're willing to pay for the property as it is, and then you make the changes, and we can help you with that. We, you know, refer people to tradesmen all the time. There's excellent carpenters and builders here that we can assist you with. So it's not as scary as it may seem coming from another country. Okay. What else? Let me catch up on this.
Janice Lee.
What? Janice? Okay.
Janice Lee.
Okay, Janice. Janice says, someone told me that if squatters came and lived on your property while you're away, that they can take it. This sounds crazy to me, but a friend said this. Yeah, so that's a funny one as well. So there are squatters' rights in Mexico, and that's part of that issue of possession. Possession is probably 10/10 of the law here. But squatters can only qualify to get kind of a provisional title if they occupy a property for, I believe it's 8 years without any protest from the owner. If you pay the taxes, pay all the bills, the owner never says, you're on my property, get off, then you can apply for kind of provisional title. But otherwise that doesn't happen. But I think there have been problems when people don't have specific rental contracts written up and legal rental contracts. And if a renter tries to overstay, I think it can be very difficult to remove a renter if you don't have a contract. So a lot of people, well, most people here, I think, if they're leaving for any amount of time, have a caretaker watch over their property. And that person typically goes in either once a week or every other week to make sure everything's cool, there's no water, nothing's happening, run your air conditioning, just freshen things up. Because when they're closed up here, pretty quickly it can go downhill. And so that's one way to make sure nobody's sitting in your property. But I don't hear this issue a lot now. I don't know. Do you hear that, Gabrielle? Do people squat in properties?
Not usually.
No, I haven't heard of it much.
Not in a while.
Okay. Well, we're saying we don't think it happens very much.
Yeah.
But also it's very difficult, and if you have a rental contract that is legal, then you can enforce that, has an end date, and you can get the person out. I hope that answered you. Okay.
Janine is asking.
Okay. So Janine is on fire tonight. So Janine is asking, I've heard a house.
This question. Anyway, by the way, it's this question.
Yeah. Great questions. I've heard of a house being over a cenote. Is there any way to check for that, or floodlands? there's not like a flood map, but most of the areas will flood if there's a hurricane. And that's not the end of the world because you have concrete construction and you know when a hurricane's coming, so you can protect your property and your electronics and stuff. The house being over a cenote, I don't know if you're building a property, you can definitely have a ground study done so they can go in and check and see if there is a cenote. And afterwards, I think you have to hire an engineer probably to come in and look at your foundation and look underneath the house, and they may have some x-ray technology. I'm not sure probably what they do for the ground study, but I'm not sure how they do that if the house is already there. So yeah, you probably need to hire an engineer for that. Let's see.
A friend, Joe.
Joe?
Crazy.
Joe says, what are you hearing about long-term plans for Puerto Morelos? New roads running from the highway to the beach area? Is the jungle in danger of being developed or is it protected? So, long-term plans for Puerto Morelos are a little tricky. We became a municipality about 4 years ago. And since then, you've seen a lot of investment in infrastructure and a lot of changes in the town. So, I think the town is looking good, and I think they're trying to modernize things a bit. But I don't know how to answer the question about long-term plans. Most people who live here, Mexican and expat, really want to protect Puerto Morelos and keep it small. And we are praying and praying and praying that they can never touch the manglar, which protect, the area between the town and the highway, because that is the same, it's all connected. The groundwater system in the manglar is connected to the reef, which is protected by world treaties. So we're hoping that's enough what am I trying to say? That's enough influence to keep protecting the mangrove. But there is a lot of pressure to develop, so I guess we're all just like, please don't. I haven't heard anything about a new road running from the highway to the beach. That would surprise me. I'm not sure where they would put that because they would have to disturb the manglar. Is the jungle in danger of getting developed? So if you're talking about the manglar, we hope not. I mean, that's the part between the highway and town. If you are talking west of the highway, past the Colonia, yes, absolutely. They're developing like crazy back there. And I don't know what kind of controls they're going to put on that. So it's a good question. It's disturbing kind of to see how much they're clear cutting and building into the jungle. But right now there is a big demand for housing in Puerto Morelos, and I think that they will continue to build to meet that demand. Hopefully, the government is now requiring more in terms of environmental impact statements. So I'm hoping that keeps some kind of check on it, but I can't answer that really. Okay. So Don is asking about rental rates. I have a rental guide I can send you if you give me your email that kind of goes over the different rates in the different neighborhoods. I don't know it off the top of my head because we don't really do rentals, but we went ahead and put that together because everyone comes in our office asking for rentals, and we wanted to be able to be helpful. But we're not in the rental business, so we don't have all that in our brains. But I'm definitely happy to email it to you. Let's see. Hi, Jody. Hi, Janice. Oh, okay. So Janice says, are you allowed to buy on or around the beach? I heard you can't. I think you joined after we got started, and so there is a restricted zone in Mexico that is 50 kilometers from a sea border where foreign ownership is restricted, but through the magic of an asset trust called a fideicomiso, foreigners can own here. So there is no restriction on whether it's on the beach or on a street or anywhere. Foreigners can own in the restricted zone, they just need to own in the asset trust. So if you go back to a little bit earlier or take a look at our downloadable ebook, 7 Things to Know Before Buying in Mexico, which you can find on our page, or our frequently asked questions page, and that'll talk a little bit more in depth about the fideicomiso instead of saying it again here. Okay, let's see. Hi, Nicole. Okay, let me go back up. So Paco says, why are there different prices on the same property? I've been looking and come across this. It's a really good question, Paco. So the basic answer is there's no MLS here, multiple list system. And so many property owners don't list exclusively with one agency. When you list exclusively with one agency, they control kind of what information goes out and make sure the listing prices are correct and all the information about the property is correct. They manage who sees the property, make sure people are qualified to buy before they go in, all that kind of good stuff. When you do a for sale by owner or have an open listing, then you have agents from everywhere listing properties, and they often are listing it at incorrect listing prices, sometimes accidentally, sometimes on purpose. And their maps are wrong. They'll show properties that are 15 minutes away as being on Avenida Rojo Gomez, right in front of the beach. So that is a real problem in our market. The whole real estate industry in this state is in the process of becoming more regulated, but there's a licensing requirement, there's all sorts of stuff, but they really aren't able to enforce anything right now. So just be careful. Try to figure out who the actual listing agent is, so you can get the correct information. But I agree, it's a problem. I see the same thing. So I see prices all over the place, and it's hard for me to even tell you how to figure that out because it's hard to figure out who the listing agent is. So if you have a property that you are wondering about, if you want to send it to me, I can try to track down that information for you. Just email it to me at kim@runawayrealty.com, and I'll try to get you the correct information if I'm able to. Okay, I need another sip of margarita.
Ryan already asked us this. No, maybe
Who
this
did?
question. I don't know if you had it.
Yeah, I did that.
I don't know.
Thank you. So Keith, I think Keith asked me a couple questions. I'm gonna go back up. Somebody asked me if there's any fixer-uppers for sale. There's a fixer-upper right up the street. It's probably a tear down for $250,000. So in this like 3-block by 10-block area of the Seaside Village is what we're calling it, or the port side, there's no $10,000 properties. There's that one that's $250,000 on Nino Zero is. The only single family homes I know that are for sale are over 800,000 and up. That's off the beach. So no, I'm not aware of any really great fixer-upper opportunities over here. In the Colonia across the highway, I think there are some great opportunities of some of the homes that are a little bit older that are in like Villas Uno and Villas Dos. Some of those are like 3 bedrooms on a big lot, and those are coming up on the market. And I think those are great opportunities for fixer-uppers, and at a nice price point, probably around 150 to 200,000. But you're really not going to find it over here right now. I'm hoping. There's a lot of houses around here that are shacks, and people are still using them, but I imagine that eventually they'll come on the market and there will be some opportunities. But empty lots right now are going for 180,000 to 200. So they're not going to be super cheap, unfortunately. Let's see. And Keith also asked about, and someone else asked as well, about association fees in the gated communities. There are several gated communities along the highway, but on the ocean side of the highway, which are Punta Arena, Regatta, and Punta Vista. And those association fees are around 950 pesos per month, which is like $45 US dollars. In the gated communities in the Colonia, actually, do you know how much those are, Gabriel?
Yes.
In Veredas del Puerto, do you know how much the condo fees are?
It's 750.
I think it's closer.
It is 750.
I'm gonna have to check on that, but I think it's closer to like 2,000 because it's smaller. There's fewer units sharing the cost. So let me double check on that and get back to you. But I do think it's a little bit more than the big Regatta and Punta Vista and Punta Arena because there's a lot of lots in there, like 300 to 400. So they're splitting the costs among a lot more people. So they're a little bit higher in the other gated communities in the Colonia. Let's see. Bonnie, hi Bonnie, is asking, after you purchase a property, can you rent it? And what about a property manager? Yes, you can rent your property. The only limits sometimes in the gated communities, if you buy in the ones I just mentioned, Punta Arena, Punta Vista, Regatta, they have tried to kind of limit Airbnb rentals, and I think they provide that you can, you can't just rent a room out of your house. It has to be the whole house. And there have been some other limits that they've tried to enforce, but honestly, I don't think they're not really able to do it. So I think pretty much everyone's renting. And there is definitely a market for that here, but keep in mind when you're budgeting and kind of dreaming of some great rental income that our high season is really December through whenever Easter happens. So it's like 4 to 5 months. And that's kind of when you're guaranteed to have some rental income. We're starting to see more rentals in the shoulder season, which is like November, which is fantastic here, and May, June. But when you are renting at those times of the year, you're really competing with the resorts, which are deeply discounting their rates. So, if you're competing for rentals with a resort that's flying people here and having a week with their family for $1,000, it's hard to compete with that. But maybe you do a longer term rental, and there's always people looking for that, and you can get some income over a longer term, maybe at a lower rate than you were doing it on the weekly rates. But many people here are doing that, and because of that, there are many good property managers here. And most people have one. If they're not here all year round, you typically have a property manager. So your property manager will either just manage your property or do property management and vacation rental management. For property management, they typically you decide with them what you want them to do. They go in maybe once a week or every other week, check your property, make sure everything's okay, pay your bills if you need them to. Used to be they had to pay everything, but now more things are able to be paid online, which is nice. And I think typically what I'm hearing is that runs around $100 to $150 a month, depending on what you're having them do. If you're having a property manager manage vacation rentals, they typically take a percentage of the rental income that you will negotiate with them. Right now, I think the going rate is anywhere from 10 to 12%. And they will do all sorts of great things. They will make sure the property is ready. They'll greet your guests, be on call if anything goes wrong during the rental, make sure it's turned over for the next rental, address ongoing maintenance issues. So those people can be a lifesaver for you if you can't be here. And certainly you can't be fielding calls about the internet went out and you're in Michigan and they're here. So it's nice to have someone here that is watching after your property. We have a list of property managers we can provide you if you are interested. People who have a great reputation here for working with people and with vacation rental management. Okay.
Janice Lee is asking, is Puerto Morelos safe? I've heard both that it is and it isn't.
Okay. Hi, Janice. Janice is asking, is Puerto Morelos safe? I've heard that it is and it isn't. That's interesting. I'm going to get on my soapbox. I think Puerto Morelos is safe. I've lived here for 8 years. I lived here for 5 years as a single person and walked everywhere and walked home late at night from bars. Don't tell my son. And I've always found it to be perfectly safe. I wouldn't walk on the beach at night. There's a lot of drunk people out there, just like I wouldn't walk in some places in Denver at night. But yeah, I mean, Puerto Morelos is very safe in terms of, we're not having school shootings and church shootings and concert shootings. There aren't crazy people with guns here, which is nice. But what there are some property crimes. Every high season, we have kind of a wave of break-ins or, crimes of opportunity. They'll test your doors and windows, and if they find one open, they come in and take whatever they can carry, typically, which is oftentimes small electronics. They'll break into your car if they see an iPad or iPhone or laptop or something out. So we do see those, but the good news about that is they're not hurting people. So it's unsettling and horrifying that someone would come into your property, but while you're there, but they're sneaking in and out and they're not hurting anybody. So yes, so that is a problem. I mean, I don't like it, but they're not hurting people, for the most part. There is a drug war happening in Mexico. That's not a secret. The cartels are fighting each other, and this area is not immune from that. I'm just going to be real honest about that. When I first came here and when we first bought here, my family bought in like 2005. It was nothing was happening over here. Nobody was fighting. There was like one cartel in charge and nobody was fighting with that cartel. And now there is definitely a war. And so you do hear stories of shootings, even in Puerto Morelos, unfortunately, but they're very targeted each other, which is unfortunate. Luckily, no one has been caught in that, but it's, overall like 100% safer than places like Detroit, Chicago, Denver. I mean, this is not a crazy violent area. But somehow, every time something happens here, it gets completely blown up in the media, and you would think that there are like decapitated heads rolling down the Rojo Gomez. I mean, it's just insane, the level of kind of paranoia. So no. What? Oh, okay. My husband wants me to move along. Okay.
The thing is, like, there's another question that I would like to say.
Yeah.
Are very interesting.
Okay.
Like, we like to say it's buyers or something.
Yeah, I can't answer that. So Janine is asking, would you say it is a buyer's or seller's market? That's a really difficult question to answer. There's not a lot of inventory, which kind of makes it a seller's market, but there also are not a huge number of buyers right now, which kind of makes it more of a buyer's market. So there's not a straight answer for that. The thing is, that kind of assumes a market like an American or Canadian residential market, and that's not what we have. We talked about this earlier. We have a second home all cash market. Things are slow. Sellers don't feel pressure. They don't have mortgages. So they're, if it takes them 3 years to sell a property, they're fine because they're still making money. They can still use their property. So it's completely different in the mechanics. So it's kind of hard for me to tell you what kind of market it is. Puerto Morelos is certainly on the map. In the last 3 years, we've had some record years of sales. A lot of the empty land has been bought up that could be bought up, and many, many properties turned over. So, and we are fielding inquiries, tons of inquiries every day about Puerto Morelos. So there's a lot of interest, but would I say that it's, become, I don't know. I just don't have a really good answer for that because it's a different kind of market. And because we have new areas and new price points, it's opened up a bunch of stuff that was never available before. So now we're seeing really kind of brisk sales in the Colonia and slower sales here. So it's kind of a toss-up. I'm sorry. I don't have a great answer for that. Let's see.
What are your thoughts on the overall
I got it. Joy says, what are your thoughts on the overall real estate market in Puerto Morelos over the next several years? Is property expected to appreciate, stay steady? I mean, the thing is, the property is going to appreciate. It's never gone down. It's a super safe market in that sense. We're kind of at the mercy of what happens in the rest of the world. So, Puerto Morelos was kind of on fire a few years ago, and the bird flu happened. Then it was on fire and the mortgage crisis happened in the US, so people couldn't get money to come by here. So yes, I think the market is going to be great. I think, people are discovering Puerto Morelos. They're realizing it's a really nice place to live. We're getting a lot of people leaving Playa del Carmen and coming to Puerto. But can I guarantee that it's gonna, the market's gonna stay as busy as it has been? No, I don't know. We're kind of at the mercy of other things happening. Sorry. Let's see.
There's another one. What percentage have property values increased in the time you have been there? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Janine. Another Janine. We have two Janines. Yeah. I don't have an answer for that. The percentage of property values increased. It certainly has increased. The reason I don't have a percentage or good figures on that is that all sales information is confidential here. I can't go to the city and find out how much someone paid for the house next door. No one can find out what I paid for my house. It's all completely confidential. So unless I'm involved in a sale, I don't know how much people really paid for their property, which makes it super hard to look at comps and to get figures like you're asking me for, because it's a hard thing to track over time. And so I don't have a percentage for that. Prices, obviously the values have increased. What was a $250,000 condo 3 years ago is a $307,000 condo today. But it all also depends on location. So, a block makes a big difference here in terms of the property value. So I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for you on that.
Janine Puglisi, hopefully to pronounce it in a correct way, but she said, is there a way from someone to buyer? You got it?
Yeah. So Janine Stecca says, is there a way for someone to find out how long a home has been on the market and what it sold for in the past? The answer to that is no, because we don't have an LLS and we don't have access to sales information. You can kind of check around and ask realtors in the market if they can tell you how long it's been on the market. I don't know. They may tell you how much they paid for it, but I guess the reality is in our market, time on the market is not it's not an important thing to know because it's not really a factor. In a US market, in a residential real estate market, time on the market tells you something about the property and it tells you maybe it's priced wrong or there's some big issues. Here, it doesn't. We're in a slow moving second home, residential, all cash, second home market. So things are, sitting on the market is not an indication of any problem with the property or that it's priced wrong. I'm not saying some properties aren't priced wrong. There absolutely are, but these sellers are not feeling pressure because they don't have a mortgage and they're probably still making money on their property by renting it and they can still use it. So we tend to see buyers are not affected by length of time on the market very much here. Hi, Phil. Hi, Laura.
Well, Jeff has been asking.
Okay.
He basically make a complete question.
So, hi, Jeff Jackson. We're going to kind of segue here. Let me just make sure we're done with the real estate stuff. Okay. So Jeff is asking, can I work in Mexico as an American citizen? You can work in Mexico if you get a work permit, which you would need to get from a Mexican employer. And they have to justify why they're hiring an American and not a Mexican for the position. So it can be done, and there are a lot of Americans working here, but that's how you go about it. And the other way you can do it is you can move to Mexico and open your own company and work for your own company. And that typically is acceptable. So that's kind of the two ways you can do that. Are there any more questions about that, about working here? Hi, Laura. Hi, Aaron. Okay. Any plans for a shopping center? There's no plans for a shopping center in Puerto Morelos, but there is a giant shopping center going in, the biggest in Latin America, between Puerto Morelos and Cancun. If you've been here lately, you would have passed this giant construction progress. It's over by the Xochimilco attraction. So probably about 15, 20 minutes north of town, almost to the airport area. And that's going to be big. So that'll be interesting. They're going to have like an ice skating rink and all sorts of stuff. We're hoping they have movie theaters because right now the nearest theater is Cancun or Playa. Let's see. Did I miss anything?
Probably not.
Okay. I did want to circle back because we didn't talk about this, kind of the cost of ownership when you live here. People often ask me about this. So your cost of ownership will include property taxes. We do have property taxes here. They're really manageable though. They are 0.0028 times the purchase price on an annual basis. So like, I probably should have done this before I got on this, but at like a $300,000 property times 0.0028, you would pay about $840 US dollar. I mean, you're going to pay in pesos, but the equivalent of $840 US dollars a year. And if you pay in December for the year in advance, you get 10% off. Used to be 20%, now it's 10%. So that's nice. So that's, a lot less expensive than most people pay for property taxes back home. So the property taxes are super manageable. They get you on the closing costs, which includes the purchase acquisition tax, which is pretty steep. It's 3.3%. So annual cost of ownership would be property tax, your fideicomiso annual fee, which is right around $500 US, your utilities, your property insurance, and then property manager if you're going to have one. You may, if you have an oceanfront property, you'll also pay beach taxes, which is called Zofamat. And those depend entirely on how much frontage you have, and they're paid to a different, to a federal agency, not Puerto Morelos. And that's about it for that. Okay. Is anyone else drinking margaritas? Or just me? This is so weird. Okay. Somebody wrote in earlier and asked for us to talk about medical care. So in Puerto Morelos, there are several doctors and medical clinics. We also have our first hospital, which is called Costa Med, and it's in the neighborhood called the Pescadores, which is up by the highway. And it's great because we never had an x-ray machine before, so now we have x-ray and what's the other thing called? Ultrasound, and all that good stuff. So there's certainly much more here than there was when I got here 8 years ago. So if you need anything, emergency here, you can be treated. If you have a sinus infection or the flu like I had, you can definitely be treated here. For more complicated issues, there are 2 great hospitals well, there's probably more than 2, but there are 2 good hospitals in Cancun that have been certified to Canadian and US medical standards. And that is Galenia and Hospiten. You can definitely buy insurance here to cover you in Mexico, and also you can buy global insurance that would cover you in the US or US, Canada, and Mexico, everywhere. Gabrielle and I have purchased insurance here. It's called AXA, A-X-A, or A-X-X, anyway, 1X or 2X, I'm not sure. Was super reasonable. I think for 2 of us, we paid like $2,000, $3,000. And we're both in our 50s. And we are insured with a great policy here in Mexico with a low deductible. We can go to the top tier of hospitals here. If we need to go for somewhere with more expertise, we can go anywhere in Mexico. So that would include Mexico City, which has world-class medical care, Guadalajara as well, and Merida, which is only a 4-hour drive away from here. So we're really happy with that. And we're also with that policy, I'm covered in the US when I go visit for emergencies, and I think it's up to $100,000, which is great because I was buying travel insurance to go back to the US in case something happened. So now we're completely covered with that, but there are other kind of policies as well. Important to note that Medicare does not cover, won't pay for any healthcare here. The US and Mexican government have been in negotiations for years about allowing that since it's so much less expensive here. But I think with the current administration and kind of the things that have fallen apart over the last year, I think it's kind of off the table for now. But it would be great because it is much less expensive here and it's less expensive to live here. So if you could come here and use your Medicare, it's kind of the best of all worlds for everyone. It's much less expensive for the US government, but we'll see what happens. Let's see. We talked about this a little bit earlier about visas. Many people have lived here for 20, 30 years and only come on a tourist visa every year because the tourist visa allows you typically 180 days in the country. So some people are just happy to come in for 3 or 4 months at a time and go out, and they've never gotten any other kind of visa. There are 2 other kinds, a temporary resident, well, more than 2, temporary resident visa, permanent resident visa, and then you can get temporary resident with permission to work. And there are different reasons to get these visas. Obviously, you're going to need one if you're going to want to work. You can't work on a tourist visa. And the temporary resident visa has to be renewed every year. The permanent resident visa is permanent. So if you're going to get a visa, you would probably just go for the permanent resident visa if you bought property here or if you can qualify for it. They used to make you go through 4 years of temporary residency before you could apply for permanent, but now they've changed that rule and you can go directly for permanent if you meet the financial requirements, which honestly seem to vary from office to office of the consulates of Mexico. You will start the process out of the country of Mexico. You start at the closest consulate to you, get approved there, and come here to finish the process. I'm not an expert on immigration. Mine kind of was at the beginning of these new rules. So we always are happy to refer our clients to a lawyer in Playa del Carmen who has represented many people that we know and helped them get their visas in place. Her name's Millie, and her company's called Legally in Mexico. And if you, I'll drop her contact information in the comments after we get done. Let's see, any questions about the medical care, insurance?
I don't know if you already answered. Jenny again is asking, I don't know how much you cover. Like, can you ask an financial question too?
Hi, Lupita.
Hi, Lupita.
Gabrielle says hi too. Janine says, do you know how you are taxed on retirement income? Do you pay both US and Mexico taxes? So I'm not a tax expert and I would refer you to one, but no, you don't pay in both places. You only owe Mexico income tax for income earned in Mexico. The US wants global income, but if you're just doing retirement income, you're just going to pay in the US. So you're not double taxed. Let's see, I hope that answers your question. And also, I've honestly done some research on this. There's some great stuff online about it as well. Okay. Did I miss anything else? Any other questions? Oh, the visas. Sorry, we're back on the visas. You may not need a visa if you just want to come in and out as a tourist. When you might want a visa is if you're going to register a car here or open a bank account. While some banks seem to be allowing people to open accounts with a tourist visa, it is more common that they request that you at least have a temporary resident visa before they'll open an account. So you may want to do that. And if there's a chance you're going to want to stay longer than 6 months, that's fine. The visa status that you have in Mexico, Doesn't have any effect on your citizenship in any other place in the world. It's simply your status here. It doesn't require you to be in Mexico for any particular amount of time during a year. You can be a permanent resident here and not enter the country for a year or so. So it's just a status that they grant you that gives you some benefits and only affects you here. If you are like me and you live here full-time and are a permanent resident, you can change your status in the US. I'm not sure if Canada has this. So now I'm a non-resident US citizen. And really, I think the only reason I decided to change that was that they kept questioning me when I would come back in through Colorado about why I was in Mexico so much. So I think I was raising some red flags, and finally just went ahead and changed my status. And so it shows somewhere in their system that I'm a non-resident who lives full-time in Mexico. Are there any questions on that? Oh, Keith, you're welcome. I hope someone else is drinking margaritas. Keith says, great margarita Monday on Thursday. Okay, that is about it for what I have tonight. I feel like I kind of raced through it. And I'm happy to answer any more questions that people have. Ooh, 7:10. It was an hour already. It's kind of weird not being able to see you guys. When we do Moving to Mexico Monday, it's much more interactive. So I hope that I didn't race through and was able to answer your questions.
This was great. It's good.
Okay, anything else? Oh, pina coladas. Sean has pina coladas. Maybe we'll do that next time.
Yeah.
Good option. What else?
Oh, one more question. It says like,
Gabrielle says there's one more question.
Will that affect your Social Security?
Will what affect your Social Security? Okay, who asked that? I just lost it.
Jenny.
Who did? Oh, Janine.
Yeah.
Janine, I'm not sure what you're asking. What will affect the Social Security? Maybe you can clarify what you're asking me. Oh, are you asking if me being a non-resident US citizen affects my Social Security? If so, no. I paid into the system my whole life. I'm gonna get it out. Well, some of it. What else? Hi, Neil. Sean, hi. Yes, there are special procedures for bringing in pets to Mexico, and there's a ton of information on that online, and I can send you some because it just recently changed. So let me dig that up, and if you want to put your email below, I can send you what I can find. But I think that they've made it easier, actually, which is nice. Hi, Janine. No, I didn't. I mean, I didn't change my citizenship at all. I am a US citizen living outside of the country. So that doesn't affect me in any way with Social Security or anything, really. It's just that they're not questioning me anymore when I go back and forth from Mexico so much. And I still have a US address. I still get, like, the IRS sends me stuff in Fort Collins, Colorado, at my aunt's house. Thank you, Aunt Marilyn. Hi, Deb. We're just about to finish.
Shawn says, like, are there any special steps procedures for bringing pets?
Yeah, I answered that one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I missed that.
Gabrielle's a little behind on the questions.
Sorry.
But he's a good margarita maker.
But I still love it.
Yeah. I think that's it. Guys, thank you so much. This is great. I wish we were all together, but this is the next best thing. If you think this would be helpful to do again, we can definitely do it. I don't know if we can do it on a weekly basis, but maybe twice a month or something. And if you thought it was useful to you, please like and share it. That would be awesome. It helps our message get out. Please download the free ebook, 7 Things to Know Before Buying in Mexico. We will also have a buyer's brainstorming guide that we're just about to finish up, kind of to give you some things to think about before you start looking at property or before you decide to make an offer. What else? We have a frequently asked questions page on our website. Please subscribe to watch our live videos, which there may be more of if this wasn't terrible. And I think that's it. We hope to see you in Puerto Morelos. If you're visiting, please let us know. Join us for Moving to Mexico Monday, or just come by the office. Oh, we have free bags at the office and koozies, so come on in. I think that's it. Yeah? Okay.
Okay.
Adios. Hasta luego.
Hasta la vista.
Hasta la vista. Yeah. Hasta la vista. Bye. And